Oh, it's a happy Monday, everyone. You're in great company. I'm Rae Bonney and I'm with you. My show, as always, is all about people recognising that it really is okay to not be okay. So turn up your radio. It's brand new into July. It's the third day already. Now today, Zimbabwe, at face value, is a small nation in the south of Africa, which has its knees buckling under the weight of an economic crisis. But at a deeper look, Zimbabwe boasts some of the world's most spectacular natural sights and wonders, and of course, its people. My guest today is one of those amazing specimens of the human race, originating from one of Zimbabwe's largest towns, Mutare. Did you like that? He has more than just one story to tell about what led him to be joining me in the studios of 3WBC today. His name is Rugare Gomo, and amongst many things that we will get into later, he is the founder of the Gomo Foundation, which exists to empower young African women to enable them to take control of their own lives and reach their potential, providing scholarships for young Zimbabwean women to attend secondary school and university. Welcome to the show, Rugare.
Thank you so much, Rae. What an introduction.
Oh, look, it was just going to go on and on.
I could just listen to your voice all day. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, it's taken a while to hone this skill, not really, but it is a thrill to have you on my show. We only met, was it 2 weeks ago?
We only met 2 weeks ago,
2 weeks.
And it's such a privilege and honor, in 2 weeks here we are together, we're having fun and having conversations, and so thank you so much for the honor of being on your show.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Now, we met at Angela's Digital Women's Networking function, which was a couple of weeks ago. Now, Ange does amazing work bringing practically the world together into one room to celebrate, whatever it is, that's topical. And our event was about networking, which is about being together.
Yes.
And I clocked you and thought, this guy looks like he's been screwed into a light bulb socket and, you're the full 100 watts.
Or more. And I had exactly the same experience, being in your presence. It was like you're such a straight shooter, fully self-expressed, and also full of love and connection. Yes. And all of that, was just in a matter of instance. So thank you for being who you are.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, short and sharp with lots of love. That's the way I like to put it. Now, I did actually say you'd jump out like one of those monochrome pictures where the character, you're the only one that's in colour. Now, before we get into it, because I want to know more about Gomo Foundation and the work that you do with women in Zimbabwe and why. And I know the answers to most of the questions, but our listeners don't. But also there are so many other tentacles to your story that we're not going to get across in this next hour. So when I was having a bit of a research around Zimbabwe during the week before coming to the show today, have you heard this? We've all heard about mermaids, and most of us believe that they are a myth and just characters in children animation and stories. But in Zimbabwe, there is a strong belief that mermaids exist. In fact, these mythical creatures are often blamed for unfortunate events such as kidnapping, torture and murder. Is that why you left?
I didn't want to
the mermaids.
The mermaids were lurking. It's interesting you say that. You're the only second person I've ever heard say that. My grandmother said something like that. Ah. And I just put it to the side and never thought anything about it. So obviously there was a cultural context which has kind of slowly lost in the conversation in Zimbabwe. But I do remember my grandmother talking about mermaids and the dangers of them. But I never thought anything more about it.
Now, your grandmother, she sounds like a very wise woman, and she was part of the vehicle that really got you thinking about things like education and having a better life for yourself. Can you, because that's kind of the start of the story.
It completely is.
Yes.
She, we call her Mbuya Mutukumira, and Mbuya means grandmother in Shona.
Please don't make me say that.
And the thing that's really exceptional about her was that she was a second wife. So my grandfather had 3 wives because what you might not know is that polygamy is still part of the culture in Zimbabwe today. Oh. But she left her husband in those days in the 50s and she decided to go back to her own village. And in those days, you never left your husband.
Oh, how did she survive that?
That's a very good question. Fortunately, my uncle, who actually had an education, welcomed her back. But one of the reasons she left was that she said to my mum, if I were to stay under your father's roof, you know, my mother and my uncle would not have had an education because he would have continued the traditional practices. So even if I look at our family and also the children of the other wives, my family is the one which has been the most educated.
Well, and the change makers.
Yes. So it's radical that she was that kind of human being in the face of what you don't do in society to leave her husband to do that.
Wow. Is she still with us?
She's not, unfortunately. She passed away when I was 14 years old.
I'm very sorry. Oh, very glad that you had her in your life, because when you were 14, I know that you have an uncle, Andrew. Now, I'm assuming he's not your biological uncle because he doesn't look the same.
He's very white. And I'm very dark. But, you know, Andrew is not my biological uncle, but in Zimbabwean culture, when you have a person who is really involved in the family, of course, that you have them as an uncle. That's really the role that he has played.
So he was your connection here in Australia, and he would visit you guys every few years.
Yes, so it all started with my dad's work. My dad has been heavily involved in youth leadership programs in Zimbabwe. So would have volunteers come from around the world to come and stay with us, maybe for 2 weeks, 3 months. So he came to volunteer to help with youth leadership programs and stayed with my family for 3 months. And I was 5 years old. He loved it. In fact, he took me to my first day of school in Zimbabwe.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And he loved it so much, he started his own travel agency here in Australia and then used to bring Australians to Zimbabwe every year, every second year for the next 15 years, really.
It's amazing what people do.
Yeah, so that's how that relationship got created.
And there was one year he didn't come. You were expecting him to come and he'd written a letter.
Yes. So because we loved, like, the experience of having Australians in our home was just fantastic. They were so much fun. They were open compared to when we had the British people coming in or the Americans or the Canadians. So I was like, I wanted to go to Australia. They're so much fun. The fun people.
And the nice people too.
Yes. So I was waiting. I remember I was waiting when I was 14 years old thinking, he's coming back.
Yes.
And I'm going to make that bold request to see if I can come to Australia.
Do you still have that letter you wrote?
I don't. I've actually asked if he has. I have the responses from him.
Oh,
yes.
I'd love to see them.
Yes, I will definitely share those with you. I have the responses. They're quite kind of magical. I cry every time I read them, actually, because that's really the beginning of a journey.
Now, we're looking almost 20 years ago.
Wow. Is it that long?
You did tell me your age in the green room when we were making that beautiful tea.
Yes.
So I interrupted your train.
No problem. So when I was 14 years old and I was going to ask him to come along, and instead his business partner Janine came along, and I was completely devastated
because the letter was written for somebody else.
Well, I actually hadn't written a letter at that time. I was going to ask him in person, and since he didn't come, I thought to myself, how in the world am I going to convey my message? So I remember sitting down at my desk late at night, writing this letter, tearing it up and starting again. And I said to myself, I just have to finish this letter. And so I finished writing this letter, which was really a vision of myself getting an education here in Australia, which I would not otherwise have received in Zimbabwe.
Wow.
And then I sealed the letter in an envelope. The next day, Janine came over to the home. And then I said to her in a very quiet voice, because I didn't tell anybody that I'd written this letter, I said, there's a letter for Andrew. Can you please give that to him? And then I didn't know what was going to happen.
And you hadn't told your parents either?
No, I told nobody. And the reason for that, part of the African culture as well, it was kind of impolite to make bold requests like that. Like, it's like, I'm a child. I can't ask an adult for something like that.
Yes.
That's something that the parents should be doing, not a child. So I was myself stepping outside the cultural norm. So I felt as if I was doing something naughty.
Yes.
In any case. But it was this burning desire inside me that I just had to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is burning in you right now. You can see it. So when we come back from the break, we're going to find out if you really did get in trouble off your mum and dad for writing the letter. Not really. You obviously didn't. But to find out what happened when you did get here and how that's all unfolded for you.
Great.
You're such a great guest. Now you're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WVC. You're with Rae Bonney. We're at really is okay to not be okay. And I'm joined live in the studio by Rugare Gomo. He's the founder of the Gomo Foundation, which exists to empower young African women to enable them to take control of their own lives and reach their potential. For those of you who've just tuned in, I'm joined live in the studio by Rugare Gomo. He's the founder of the Gomo Foundation, which exists to empower young African women to enable them to take control of their lives and get an education. That coffee, Rugare, it really plays havoc with my tongue twisting sometimes.
I love it.
Hey, I also learnt something else last night, and this is about education in Zimbabwe. There's an old saying from old Zimbabwe that basically says, if you haven't started studying by the time the jacarandas have bloomed, you're going to fail. And that is it. So it doesn't get much more direct,
than that.
Very direct.
You better study. It's practically, it's so interesting that, the jacarandas are so beautiful.
Yes.
They used to line our streets in Mutare, beautiful purple color, and they'd fall off and color the road, literally.
Yes.
And in Zimbabwe, there is a culture of education and educating yourself, because if you don't, there's no life.
Yes.
So education is linked to life.
And that's why I linked it, because it's part of our program.
Yes.
Do you like that segue?
Perfect.
We have jacaranda trees here as well.
I haven't seen them.
I think we do.
Okay.
We have lantana trees as well. They're quite beautiful.
I think we're going to have to go on an excursion then.
We will. I think they were in New South
Right.
Wales. You have an amazing story, of which I've become very familiar with very quickly and most inspired. But could you tell us where? We just said it ended off. We'd written a letter as a 14-year-old in Mutare in Zimbabwe, and Uncle Andrew has now helped you get passage here to Australia.
Yes.
So tell me about that, this arriving here.
Just to step back just slightly, I waited 3 months to get a response. So for 3 months, I had no idea what was actually happening.
Yes.
And then my dad comes home and says, I've received an email from Andrew. What's this about you going to Australia? So practically Andrew had said yes, and which was mind-blowing. So the thing that's happened was that he himself was not a wealthy man, but he said yes and discovered for me to get here. And a school actually in Box Hill, because here we are, called Kingswood College, said yes, we're willing to give him a scholarship so that he can get an education.
A bit of a shout out there to Kingswood College, because I know Uncle Andrew did approach quite a few schools.
Yes.
In fact, was it?
He approached government schools.
Yes.
He approached, some other private schools. The government schools said they don't support international students.
Yes.
And Kingswood College said, well, we've never actually had an African in our community before, and it'll be good for the students.
Good for our balance of diversity.
Absolutely. But it was interesting from where they were thinking, like from a global perspective, like they were standing for, our children up in a bubble, let's actually expand. And so they saw this as an opportunity. So it was a both-way opportunity for me and for them.
Yes. And again, Kingswood College, part of the 3WBC community. Good on you. And hopefully you are listening in. That's fantastic. So then where did you settled in this community?
So I settled in this community. In fact, I lived in Box Hill South for many, many, many years. I think over 8 years. So I actually stayed with Andrew.
Yes.
And the thing was that Andrew was not only running his own business, he was a single man, but he was also looking after 4 other troubled boys. So he was also a foster carer.
Wow. And you lived with those boys?
And I lived with them. So my first experience living in Australia was actually living in with boys who had come from troubled homes.
Not from South Africa?
No, from Australia. So, some of the boys, one of them, he was 6 years old, and I actually had seen his mum OD when he was 6 years old and had no home.
Yes.
And Andrew was looking after him. Some of them had been kicked out of home because they'd had social behavioral issues.
Yes.
And so I've come from a mum and dad home in Zimbabwe, and I grew up in a Christian community.
Yes.
Coming in to live with 4 other boys, dealing with other stuff. And I'm sitting into a new cultural context.
That's a lot of big change.
It was.
And so did you become close with the boys that you were living with?
Completely. I was actually the best man for one of them at their wedding a few years ago.
Oh, wow.
And their lives have all altered.
Immeasurably improved because of the kindness and care of one Andrew.
Yes. The man who actually stood for other people in his own community here in Australia and the world,
Yes.
so that they can have a better life.
Which has inspired you to do all of the many things
Completely.
that you do now.
Yes.
Isn't it amazing that, you have this, we talk about this, burning desire to be, but you're not really sure what that itch is. And then as you go through life and are attracted to people or things that give you further vehicle or further drive to move forward.
Yeah.
And who would have thought, living in a house with a man who's attracted some troubled boys could be that inspiration.
And I think the extraordinary part about it was that he taught me to be a person to act on my commitments independent of what my circumstances are.
Yes.
I'm not necessarily a wealthy man myself.
You look wealthy. You look $1 million.
Thank you. I'm wearing the gold mustard top just for everybody to know. That's my color. I wear it everywhere.
Yes.
And that's what he really taught me, to be able to commit to something independent of my circumstances, because I too can make a difference in the world.
Yes.
And I don't have to wait for a particular circumstance to be able to do that.
No, but I know that you are also very, very active around, getting yourself educated,
Yes.
after the generosity of Andrew. And you're now a lawyer, a qualified lawyer.
Yes, I
am.
am.
Did you raise something like $100,000 to get yourself through university?
That's correct. So after year 12, it was like, it was during the Zimbabwean crisis. No
Yes.
food in the shops. The university had been closed down. And I had no other avenue to actually go to university. So I worked, was
Yes.
one of my avenues. So
McDonald's?
I worked
in
at McDonald's.
Blackburn North?
And I worked there for about 5 years. In fact,
Yes.
one of the things I was proud of was I became the shift manager when I was 19 years
Oh,
old.
go you.
I know, I loved it. I actually loved working there because I loved being able to connect to my customers and clients. In fact, I
Yes.
used to even get tips. So we don't have McDonald's in Zimbabwe. So
Oh,
for
really?
me, coming to McDonald's was like, I thought I was coming to like the Ritz Hotel. So I took it on as if it was like a hotel and really connected to
Yes.
my clients. But that was just one of the ways, by working, of course. And then I started sharing with people what I was bumping up against. And people in the Kingswood community, took a stand and contributed thousands of dollars for me to go to university as well. My biggest sponsors, the Chomley family, contributed over $27,000 for me to go to university. $5,000 would come into my bank account every year without fail.
Wow. And you just didn't go and spend it on,
Yes.
going out.
And, I used to be a quiet person at that
Yes.
time in my life. So it also got me out of my shell to connect with people. People
Yes.
were investing in me. How else can I then contribute to them so that they can experience the journey, my
Yes.
journey
Yes.
together?
That's a conscience, isn't it?
Yes.
Which is great. I think it's really important that we have that and recognise it. But I know that there's somebody else who's been quite inspiring in your life or inspired you. And I did a bit of research.
Ooh, I'm intrigued to know who this is.
So the very next song, or the very next song we have coming up, before I get that cued correctly, no, don't you jump the gun there, young man, is by a person who you describe as being one of your absolute greatest. And this song describes a love that is so phenomenal that it is heavenly. It was written by One Republic frontman Ryan Tedder and Evan Kidd. And I'm Rae Bonney, joined in the studio today by Rugare Gomo. Gosh, that Beyonce, doesn't she sing a long song?
I love Beyonce. She can sing it for as long as she wants.
And you got a little bit teary there.
I did.
You did.
Because who she is this, not just is she a musician, but she is a representation of what is also possible for
Yes.
us as human beings, for my mother, for my sister. She's really standing for each and every woman to live a life of their dreams, independent of, relying on a man, which we are in a society where, particularly in Zimbabwe, where you rely on men. So it's like
Yes.
this self-worth. And so I want my sister, who is 11 years younger than I am, to live in a world that she never has to ever negotiate anything just because
Yes.
she's a female.
Is she still in Zimbabwe?
She lives in Cape Town in South
Okay.
Africa. That's where she's studying. She's the first female in my family to go to university, and she gets to graduate this year in December.
Oh, wow. How
Yeah.
proud must you be?
We are so proud.
Yes. And what is she studying?
So she's studying commerce, finance,
Yes.
and accounting majors.
she can come across here and help you out.
Absolutely. She actually looks after our finances already.
Oh, good. Well, before we talk about some of the success stories that have eventuated through Gomo Foundation, I want to talk a little bit about the other stuff that you do. You're a qualified lawyer, but you also help people, entrepreneurial people, like how I said that really smoothly.
Yes.
You know, re-engineer their businesses for success and not just financial success, but also really developing that work-life balance. And through men, you told me a great story about a father who wanted to spend more time with his family.
Absolutely. So, you know, many of us live in a context of what is my career? What is my career? I actually don't live in a context of my career. I have a context in which I live my life. And my context, which I'm connected to, is my why, is I exist to empower and enable people to create the lives of their dreams. So everything that I do comes out of that. So yes, I'm a qualified lawyer, and my law firm, Simbisa Law, exists to empower startups, entrepreneurs, and angel investors to create businesses. But I have discovered what it takes to do that. So many people might have an idea, but don't know how to bring that to life and sustainably. So I partner with them to make that happen in reality.
Oh, look, I do a lot of work with Family Business Australia.
Yes.
And in the small business sector, and so many people have amazing ideas, but as you said, have no idea how to bring them to life, let alone sustain it for the long term, and can often find themselves in my patch, which is the mental health side of things, where people suffering unnecessarily with undue stress, and so that's where you come in and circumvent all of that.
It's interesting you say that. So through the other business, Kukura International, you know, one of my clients, he has been in this business for the past 15 years. And when I got the phone call, he was like, I want to sell my business. But what I really heard was that he just wanted to spend more time with his wife and his son, and had no access in doing that.
Yeah.
So we started working together, and I said to him, you don't actually want to sell your business. You actually want to find a way for your business to be sustainable, independent of you, so that you have that freedom to spend with your wife and your child. So it's my job to listen for what people really want and make that happen in reality. So we've been working together for the past 6 months, and their relationship has completely altered. So some of the things you're saying about mental health, many business owners are dealing with that, surviving. It's like, I have to be strong, I have to make it, but inside they're dying because they're actually not knowing what the next right actions are.
And even sadly not enjoying the love of the idea, the original idea that was got them so excited that you know that led them to taking that chance. So I think that's great. There's just an extension of the stuff that you do, the extension of who you are, and that's enabling people to be the best me or the best you.
Absolutely.
That you can. So we have to go to a break almost very soon. But tell us just quickly, what is a story about one of the girls that you've helped? You know.
Thank you for asking. So I'm going to share about Cecilia.
Yes.
So Cecilia is living in Zimbabwe. She practically had 99.95, so an outstanding student.
Yes.
She's an orphan. So both her parents
How
died.
old is she?
She is now 20.
Yes.
But when I got to meet her or have the conversations with her, she was 18 years old. And a Crossread Investment in Zimbabwe, which is a subsidiary of the Red Cross, came to me and said, there's this girl, she's got the best marks, but she was literally in the fields of Zimbabwe, living on food handouts, because she did not have the resources to go to university, and she had a place at the University of Zimbabwe to do accounting. And for me, when I heard that story, it was like, that is completely unacceptable, you know? And at that time, I didn't have the financial resources myself. But I said, yes, there's no way that Cecilia is not going to go to university. So fast forward, 2 people in my community took on committing for her full education, everything covered for.
Wow.
For the whole 4 years that she's doing her accounting degree. And some of the things that she said, she says, thank you so much for supporting me. I used to think that I was inferior, but now that you've taken a stand for me and contributed to me, and I know that I am not inferior, and now I can share that with other girls in my own who are in the same circumstances as I am.
Wow.
And that's who she's become for herself. She's become worthy, proud, and now has a whole new world and opportunity for her life.
And that's, when we talk about paying it forward, you think about Uncle Andrew paying it forward, and you paying it forward to Cecilia, and now she's got this whole piece that she can now translate or transfer onto the next person. And I guess that's the beauty of your work, is because it just keeps on self perpetuating, doesn't it?
And the thing about what we do is it's not just a scholarship. We're not just interested in the scholarship. When I came to Australia, getting having the scholarship was great, but it is all the community support. Being able to go to a barbecue, learning about the AFL, having somebody to talk to about when I couldn't understand what was happening in society. So we always surround everybody we support with people.
Yes. And people really, really do underestimate the power of community.
Yes.
And, we're sitting in community right here at 94.13 WBC, bit of a shout out there, but we are a community radio station, and we serve not only our community, but we stream live all over the world. And I know through my Facebook page, you might have some people who are listening in from Zimbabwe today. So big shout out. Are the jacaranda trees blooming yet? Everyone failing? No.
Brilliant.
But we do have another little dude in the studio today, and he's a regular on my show, and he's a regular in my life as well, because he happens to be my son, Rory. And you and Rory were talking in the green room earlier about what it's like being 8. And Rugare, you mentioned that you were a bit hyperactive when you were 8.
So I have the privilege to be sitting next to Rory right now, and we've had so much fun already this morning. And I was asking him about his holidays, and he's like, it's only 2 weeks. And he said, what would you like it to be? He said, I want it to be 2 months. I was like, that sounds like me when I was 8 years old. When I was 8, I was hyperactive.
As opposed to now, where you're just really chilled and loose.
I'm so chilled. Yeah. I'm a lawyer. I'm so repressed. No, but it was like, as an 8-year-old, you'd find me in the trees, climbing trees. I used to go through drains, and my mum and dad would be so concerned because they're scared the drains would actually fall and collapse.
Yeah.
But that was the kind of, they called me the monkey. I was the monkey. I was the messy eater. One of my aunts sent me a message over the weekend, says, how's the messy eater? I was just always doing something.
Well, Rory's a little peach, and when he was in the bath last night, I looked at him and went, oh, he just came back from his dad's, and at his dad's place in Mansfield, he has a motorbike. So, and I looked at him. Rory, what did Mum see all over your legs?
I had a very big bruise.
You did have and you still do have a very big bruise. But what's it like being 8 for you?
Fun.
What's the funnest part?
Probably getting to ride a motorbike.
And my jokes, of course. That's pretty fun. I've got a surprise for you, actually.
What?
Do you want to know what it is?
Yeah.
And I'm going to announce it on air before we go to the next song. But what do you think of this? After the show, which is going to end in approximately 20 minutes, I'm going to get you in my car, and I'm going to drive you to Palace Cinemas in Baldwin, right up the road, and we're going to see Cars 3 together.
Yes.
I'm joining you for that.
Oh, you can come along. Absolutely, you can come along. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, I like it.
Okay, well, can you you can't introduce the next song because you don't know what it is, but can you give the shout out saying you're listening to?
You're listening to
Read the song.
94.1 FM 3WBC.
And you're with Rae Bonney, Rugare Gomo, and Rory Gomo. Did I say that?
You say that perfectly. I love it.
It's really, for some reason, I just can't get it right in my head. But he's not only the founder of the Gomo Foundation that helps Zimbabwean women reach their full potential through education, but we've not yet, we have unveiled that he's also a lawyer. But we had a little conversation in the green room before about, I asked the question, do you also help boys? And you said, well, indirectly, yes, but our focus is on girls in Zimbabwe because we want to do that piece absolutely right so it does have that resonance down the track, which I thought is a really great way of looking at people who are very cause-driven tend sometimes to want to be everything to everyone all at once and lose momentum and energy pretty quickly. And we talked about how many charities are there here in Australia?
There are hundreds and thousands of charities here in Australia. Hundreds and thousands.
Yeah, and people talking about how can we help, let's start a charity. Please don't.
Don't.
There are plenty to join. In fact, you could join maybe 100 each person, and we still probably wouldn't be capacitating them properly.
So true. You know, when somebody asked me once the question, would I recommend they start a charity? I said, absolutely not. Don't set up a charity. Find a cause that you're passionate about and give your time.
Yes.
You know, and know that you're there making a difference for no other reason than to make the difference.
And quite often you will never ever know what that difference is, but you will know that whilst you're there and opening your mouth and being present and authentic in that presence, you'll be making a difference. So speaking of making a difference, how do people connect with Gomo Foundation, and, you know, what different ways can people contribute?
Sure. There are many different ways you can connect with the Gomo Foundation. So we have our website, www.gomofoundation.org.au.
It's not hard to remember, is it?
And not at all. And also we've got our Facebook page, but you can also email me directly at rugare@gomofoundation.org.au.
That's RUGARE?
Yes, that's correct.
Dot?
Just Rugare at Gomo Foundation.
There you go.
And, you know, how does one get involved? We've provided so many different ways for people to get involved, because we also realize that people are at different stages in life, and sometimes you might feel you don't think you can make a difference. You can. You absolutely can. So we have our team of volunteers from all walks of life, actually. You know,
So from here and there. So you've got
here in Australia. We actually have volunteers in Australia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Canada, Saudi Arabia. So Gomo is global.
Yes.
And people find themselves in it. Some people are retired.
Yes.
Some people are at university. We even have people at school who come to be part of the Gomo Foundation. And what we're more interested in is what skill sets that you want to actually contribute as well in our volunteers program. We also have our ambassador program, which is very exciting.
Yes.
We just launched that a month ago.
Wow.
And the ambassador program allows a person to financially support a girl through their education. So we have different levels. We have a program where you support a whole girl for 1 year.
A whole girl,
Yes,
just not her arm.
Not just her arm, a whole girl. There's my English, my Zimbabwean English.
And if she's 15 years old, you get all the moods to go along with it as well. So.
And the music. Yeah, so you can either support a girl for a whole year, or half their education or their entire education. So in Zimbabwe, secondary school is for 6 years. But for us, being part of, you know, a sponsorship is not just about the giving money. We also want you to be part of the journey. We will, you know, share her story. They'll be in communication with you, because for us, it's the holistic living rather than just giving your money and you don't really know what happens to it.
Is it similar to the setup with World Vision or one of those groups, or
It's you could say it's similar, but it's actually very different, because you'll get involved minutely in their life.
More high touch
Yes.
than.
So for us, it's really important. We work directly with the schools. That's one of the things that sets us apart. We're very connected with the schools, with the teachers, the headmasters, the students themselves, and the community. So you get a well-rounded experience of what it's actually like to be living in Zimbabwe, what they're dealing with, their aspirations, what their next levels are. So that's what the ambassador program provides.
Yes.
And we have people teenagers who are ambassadors to people who are, you know, either working or retired. It's quite exceptional. So that's also available. And then, of course, we've got our corporate partnerships as well. So you can partner with us by, you know, you could be a media company and you want to provide your skills in that way, or also donate. So there are many ways corporate partners work with us. So, for example, Maddox has done all our legal work, which has been over $30,000. Believe it or not, that's how much it can actually cost
Maddox.
us.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's just an example of how our corporate partners can also work with us, but that helps us elevate our performance as an organization, so that all the proceeds go directly to the girls.
Yes, and I think, you know, that raising awareness, you know, we bandy that around a lot in the not-for-profit sector. Let's just raise awareness. But it really is, you know, raising awareness around issues that we necessarily aren't front of mind, and for good reason, because, you know, whilst we're in our own communities, it's very difficult to be empathic about what's happening on the other side of the world. But, you know, what you've brought, you've been able to, you know, bring some of it here and return some there, which I think that's the real power of it. And thank goodness we have you.
Thank you so much. And what I'm standing for, imagine, maybe one of those girls is going to create the technology for blind people to see.
Really?
Maybe.
Oh, right. I thought maybe there was literally somebody who was out there pioneering
But because
that.
they've had that opportunity, then that becomes available in the whole world.
Yes.
Maybe one of those girls is going to find the cure for cancer. Because she had that opportunity. We've unlocked what's in the mind and brought it to the forefront.
Yes.
That's what the difference has been made to me. So I'm really connected to that's what's available in the world for all of us here. So it's like standing for humanity together side by side.
And there's no question about the repression of women there in South Africa, and especially around things like, education, which I often say, because I meet so many people, probably even more than you do, but always imagining, have you got some unlocked skill or attribute or gift? Perhaps, you've never tried singing before and you've got an amazing singing voice, or, have you ever picked up a paintbrush before? We don't know when we're so busy surviving sometimes, especially in those kinds of settings where survival probably is the primary thing, that, you're providing this opportunity to unlock those beautiful gifts that will then resonate and translate in the world.
And it's interesting you say that, the conversation of surviving, even us here in Australia, we survive. Some of our parents would tell us, become a doctor, become an engineer, become a lawyer.
Yes.
And we take on that path for ourselves, and then we get stuck, and then we survive that. We get married, we get the mortgage, and it's like, I've always wanted to be the singer, but I never had the courage. Same thing.
Yes.
It's exactly the same
I wanted to be a singer, and I do have the courage, but usually in my car.
On the train for me.
Now, you're not married yet.
No, I'm not.
But you are dating.
I am dating.
How's that going?
I can't actually get married in Australia because we don't have gay marriage yet. So I'm looking forward to the day.
That's silly of me to forget that one.
So I just want to acknowledge Germany, that this week they've actually passed the laws to allow gay couples to actually get married and also adopt children. So which is a victory for humanity. And I'm looking forward to the day that's actually available here in Australia, so that's also available and I can get to choose that should I choose to do that.
A basic human right to marry somebody that you love.
That I love and connect with.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic that we could examine. But good luck with the dating.
Thank you very much.
I'm not having much luck either. So, and
that's for the next show.
Unfortunately, you and I can't hook up. We can only hook up in business. So, on that note, because that's a great one to go out on, we have Ken Lyons, the divine Ken Lyons, who has just entered the studio, and he has a guest who's a naturopath. So that'll be fascinating listening. And Ken, very special man that he is, actually took me on a date on Sunday. And that was just beautiful. We went to an amazing winery. It was a surprise out in Warrandyte called Old Garave. I think that's how you pronounce it. But it was absolutely beautiful. And Ken, thank you again from the bottom of my heart for making my birthday absolutely amazing. So who's taking us out is somebody else who's pretty special, Peter Gabriel. A lot of you might remember him as the lead singer of Genesis right back. He started in the late 60s, I think, but he worked with Amnesty International to set up the Human Rights Now tour and performed across the world with Sting, Bruce Springsteen, Tracy Chapman and Youssou N'Dour, which I just said that without stumbling. In fact, our final song today is a compilation by Peter and Youssou. It deals with the women's movement in Africa, where men traditionally allow them very few rights. And even though I am a massive men's rights activist, there is no denying that, these issues really do exist. So have a great week, everyone. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Rae. This has been extraordinary.
Have a great day.